Hello, welcome to Reformation and Revival Now. I'd love to share with you a word that God has given me on the subject of fasting, even though I'm not going to go to a fasting scripture at this point. But I want to share with you something. It's in Luke 9:23. It says, "And he, Jesus, said to them, If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it. But whosoever will lose his life for my sake, the same shall save it. For what is a man advantage if he gain the whole world and lose himself or be cast away?" And I want to say that when we're talking about fasting, one of the things that I'm learning is the whole thing of denying yourself. Now, I know that it's very easy to think of uh, fasting or to look at it in the standpoint of I'm sacrificing my body or I'm sacrificing my food or sacrificing my drink or whatever it is that, you know, one can sacrifice. But I don't want you to see it that way. I want you to see it as the way we follow Jesus is that we don't lead with the flesh. We lead with the Spirit. And the only way you can lead with the Spirit is really to deny yourself. And as Luke's version says, deny yourself daily. Paul said, I die daily. And that is exactly the context of this scripture. We are to die out to the pleasures and the comforts of our flesh. Not necessarily an easy task. Well, someone says, hey, if anything that's worth anything requires work. But that's not the type of work I'm referring to, because I fasted many times in my life. Many, many times. But I just didn't get the fruit out of it that I had received in giving and in receiving and in prayer. Between the three disciplines mentioned in Matthew 6, I just did not have a lot of maturity and a lot of development in fasting. But God has given me a breakthrough, and I'm sharing that with you now. A lot of times when we're dealing with fasting, I've said before that you're really telling your flesh to be quiet, okay, and stop hollering so that God can cause you to receive the things of the Spirit. Now, I still agree with that, but I've learned that it goes a lot further than that. What happens is, in a society where having fun and having pleasure and getting your way and doing what you want to do is actually worshiped and adored. To have a lifestyle that is sacrificial. I mean, Jesus says this, the Son of Man came to serve, not to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom. Now, if Jesus came into the world for that purpose, that shows you what Jesus is about. Jesus is about serving. Now, if you spend your life always in the consumption mode, then it will simply rise up against you if you try to do something else other than consumption. Now, in the medical sense, consumption is considered a disease. See that an indulgent person is almost a diseased person spiritually because they have to take orders from their passions. They have to take orders from their pleasures. They have to take orders from their fleshly desires. And so with that sort of thing, Jesus said, if you're going to follow me and be serious, you must deny yourself daily, then take up your cross. Now notice how you deny yourself first before you take up the cross. Many people attempt to take up the cross but have a problem because unless you deny yourself, you're going to be at war with yourself. Because the flesh is going to say to you, I want my trinkets, I want my pleasures, I want the things that make me comfortable, and if I don't get them, I'm going to pout. Now, that's exactly what I'm dealing with. Now, 26 says, for whosoever shall, I'm sorry, 24 says, for whoever will save his life will lose it, but whosoever will lose his life for my sake will possess it. The kingdom is different. The kingdom is different in that you sow with your very life. Okay? But in that indulgent lifestyle that we live here in most parts of the world, but particularly in the States, it says get everything for yourself. Get everything for yourself. Do everything for yourself. It's all about you. It's all about you. Well, in the kingdom, it's different. It's all about God and others. So it's a whole different way of thinking. So if we say that, oh, if I fast, I'm a really serious Christian, that's not accurate. If I pray, I'm a really serious Christian, that's not accurate. If I give, I'm a really serious Christian, that's not accurate. It's if you love Jesus, and Jesus says, if you love me, keep my commandments. So give your life away. Some of you need to submit to a local church and a local pastor and give them the right to bring you up in the Lord and to raise you in Jesus. Some of you can't stand to take orders. Some of you only take orders from your boss because you want a paycheck, but you can't stand anytime he tells you to do anything. Now you might say that, Kevin, how can you say something like that? I want you to know that the flesh has strongholds, and I had them. I had certain mechanisms in my life that were controlling me. And I will share them with you. When I was very young, I wanted to be independent. And I remember stealing from my older brother's money because I wanted to have money on my own. Now, my motivation really wasn't to steal, though I did, and that was wrong. But I wanted to have something of my own. So once I became of age, I wanted to be independent. That independence would later become a problem in my relationships. But it gave me pleasure to be independent. Now, notice how I said it gave me pleasure to be independent. I liked it. The other thing was, my dad was sitting at the table one day with a huge plate of food. I looked at his plate and I said in my heart, when I get of age, I'm going to eat as much as he eats. Unfortunately, that came true. I ate more than my dad ever ate, and I ate wrong. And once I gained some independence, started having a little change in my pocket, I would go and take in my little independent spirit and go get a bag of chips, go up into the family bathroom, lock myself into it, and eat all the chips to myself. Well, not only was it greed and gluttony, but it was also independence. Now you see, and it gave me pleasure. Hey, food is the number one pleasure giver of all time. Just ask Adam and Eve. Okay. And so then there came along very, very early also music. It got so where I became a music junkie. Now, there's nothing wrong with loving music. My God, God made music. But what happened was I became a music junkie to where it's anything musically that I could get my arms around, I took it in. Anything I could listen to, even if it was negative, even if it was perverse, even if anything. So I just listened to it. And it got to be a stronghold where I could not do anything, couldn't go to school, I couldn't drive, I couldn't do anything without having earphones in my head listening to some music. Music became such a terrible stronghold in my life that God finally had to challenge it. Some things I was listening to that were gross, and I got so angry I took the album off the turntable and threw it across the room. But music gave me such pleasure and release, I felt I had to have it. Now you notice what's happening now? We talked about independence. We talked about food, which made me a very fat man eventually. And now we're talking about music. None of those things are wrong in themselves. But because I was so hooked to pleasure, because I was so hooked to having a good time and enjoying myself, I did become slaves to them. Now we get to area number 4. Very early in my life, I began to be introduced to pornography. In the first episodes, okay, it wasn't so bad. But one day at my daddy's job, I stepped across the line where for the first time I chose to look at it. And when I chose to look at it, a door opened up and I began to really like it. Now, I've never been, even at its height, a person really into pornography. But it had a different effect on me. What it did to me was cause me to undress a lady while in her clothes, which would bring shame. Because when I was young, it was nothing for me to take a bath with my sisters. I know that might seem crazy to some of you, but that's how it was in my house. I never looked at my sisters or my parents or my aunts about their nakedness was never a big deal until pornography entered in. It brought great shame in my life. It also went over into fantasy and to lust, which brings shame. Now that's the particular manifestation it did with me. Then another thing that began to go. Now notice how I'm stacking these things up. I had a short fuse, and me being short fused, and also being impulsive by nature, I could blow up in my temper incredibly. This would be one of the most destructive things in my life, to have a short fuse. So, as you see in this stack, all these things I did gave me pleasure. I felt good when I blew my tongue. I wasn't looking at pornography because it didn't do something for me. I was looking at it because I liked looking at naked women and their body parts. Okay? It gave me pleasure. Twisted as it may be, it gave me pleasure. Blowing my temper gave me pleasure. That's why I did it. In fact, that's why we do a lot of things that we're doing. So what happens is when you get saved? Well, when you get saved, the umbilical cord is cut from sin, which is true. But what happens is, if you don't take up the cross and deny yourself, those things will begin to rush back in and begin to assume the control that they originally had, which is what happened in my case. During the time of fasting, God began to break me free of this. And in the next video, I'm going to share that with you. But you need to know these things, because these are the things that we don't talk about as Christians. We don't talk about, stealing and adultery and embezzlement and murder. I mean, we talk about that. But really the things I talk about are the real issues behind a lot of stuff. So the next video we'll get more into it. So I'll be right back. Actually, I didn't know we would make 2 videos of it, but I just can't get through all of it. So I'll see you in just a moment.